Assalamu alaikum. Today we will talk about the pharyngeal arches, bronchial apparatus. Bronchial apparatus or pharyngeal arches هي الأقواس البلعومية أو ما تسمى بالجهاز الخيشومي نسبة لظهورها كخياشيم السمك، والجزء ده بيظهر عشان كديفلوبمنت اوف ذا نيك، كظهور للعنق، فبيظهر الفارنجال ارشز او ما نسميه البرانكال ابريتس. This is an introduction. After cranial folding of the developing embryo, the primitive mouse is bounded by two bulge or two swelling. This is the primitive mouse is bounded by two bulge or two swelling. One bulge for the for brain and another for the cardiac bulge. Then the mandibular and the neck region appear between the primitive mouse and the developing thorax represented by the cardiac bulge. This occurs through development of bronchial apparatus or what is called pharyngeal arches on each side of the cranial part of the foregut, cranial part or pharyngeal part of the foregut. So we called the arches pharyngeal arches. The arches appear by the 5th week of intrauterine fetal life, and they form a characteristic feature of the embryo at this stage, like this. Each arch is formed of a core of mesoderm, here a core of mesoderm covered by ectoderm from the outside and endoderm from inside, separated by depression. The depression or grooves on the outer side are called cleft, and on the inner side are called pouches. Then, the mesoderm on each side of the developing pharynx increase in thickness, forming 6 pharyngeal arches on each side, called pharyngeal arches, as we said. The arches are covered by ectoderm and lined by endoderm. They are separated, as we said, from each other by ectodermal external grooves called pharyngeal clefts. The pharyngeal clefts are lined by ectoderm, To remember this term, the ectoderm contains C and cleft begin with C. And internal pharyngeal pouches from the inner side, these are called pouches, lined by endoderm. So we have 6 pharyngeal arches separated by 5 clefts from the outside and 5 pouches from the inner side. Fate of these arches: the fifth pair are completely disappear. So the remaining five are the first, the second, the third, fourth, and sixth. We not call the last one as the fifth, but the sixth as the fifth arch completely disappear. The mesoderm of each arch condenses to form a core of cartilage. Then the mesoderm of each arch is differentiated into skeletal element, yellow color, skeletal element, muscular element here, clarified by the red color, and vascular element, artery and vein. The vascular element are represented by the aortic artery. We will talk about it at the end of this lecture. Each arch of these pharyngeal arches receive energy from the developing brain to supply the arches. The first arch has a special name or another name called mandibular arch. While the second has also special name called hyoid arch. Then when we talk about the derivative of each of the remaining arches, as we said that the fifth arch disappeared, so the remaining five arches, the first, second, third, fourth, and sixth arches gives a derivative. There are a derivative of the mesoderm or mesodermal derivative. We call them as the pharyngeal arch derivative, and there are ectodermal derivative. We call them as pharyngeal cleft derivative, and also on the other side there are endodermal derivative. We call them pharyngeal pouches derivative. This figure is an important figure to remember it on talking about the skeletal derivative of the pharyngeal arches. Here is the first pharyngeal arch, which is called mandibular arch. Its ventral aspect is divided into two processes, maxillary process here and the mandibular process below it, while its dorsal part remain without bifurcation to form the squamous part of temporal bone. The first pharyngeal arch, as we see, regarding the skeletal element, for the maxilla, the palatine bone below the maxilla, the mandible, and we must mention this cartilage, mecal cartilage, which is a temporary cartilage, but it acts as a template for building the mandible, but not share in the mandible. In other words, the mandible developed from intramembranous ossification, not intracartilaginous ossification. So the skeletal derivatives of the first pharyngeal arch are represented here by the maxilla, below it the palatine bone, then the mandible, and mention the mecal cartilage, then the squamous part of temporal bone, then the ossicles, the first two ossicles of the middle ear, which named malleus and incus. As we know that the ossicles of the middle ear are three bones: malleus, incus, stapes. The first letters of these words, M-I-S, miss. The first two bones arise from the first arch, while the third bone arises from the second arch. Again, the first pharyngeal arch derivative regarding the skeletal element are the maxilla, palatine bone, mandible, mecal cartilage, squamous part of temporal bone, malleus, incus, anterior ligament of malleus, and sphenomandibular ligament. These are the skeletal elements of the derived from the first pharyngeal arch. Then we come to the second pharyngeal arch skeletal element. skeletal element, as we see the stapes, styloid process, stylohyoid ligament, superior part of body of hyoid bone, lesser horn of hyoid bone. To remember this structure, the second arch begin with S, and most of these derivatives begin with S. Stapes with S, styloid process with S, stylohyoid ligament begin with S. Lesser horn of hyoid bone also contain S. Superior part of body of hyoid bone or upper part of hyoid bone, superior part contain S. These are the skeletal element of the second pharyngeal arch, or we call it hyoid arch. Then we come to the third arch. The third arch skeletal element include the greater horn of hyoid bone and the lower part of body of hyoid bone. Then we descend to the fourth arch skeletal element, include, as we see, the thyroid cartilage, or called Adam's apple thyroid cartilage, the most prominent cartilage of the larynx. Then we come to the sixth arch derivative, skeletal element derivative, include the other cartilage except thyroid, other laryngeal cartilage except thyroid. These are the skeletal element derivative of the pharyngeal arches. As we said, this figure is highly important to remember this structure. Here we collect the derivatives of the pharyngeal arches and the most important points to be asked about. The derivatives of the pharyngeal arches: mesodermal derivative of branchial apparatus, or mesodermal derivative of pharyngeal arches. We said before the skeletal element of the arches. Then we complete the derivative, as we said before, that the derivative include skeletal element, muscular element, then mention the nerve supply, then mention the pharyngeal arch artery derivative. Regarding the first pharyngeal arch, the skeletal element, as we said before, include, as we said in the diagram before, squamous part of temporal bone, maxilla and palatine bone, mandible and temporary mesial cartilage, sphenomandibular ligament, anterior ligament of malleus and incus. Then we come to the muscular element derivative. Muscular element derivative. Before we mention it, we must remember the nerve supply. The nerve supply here of the first pharyngeal arch is the mandibular nerve, or the fifth cranial nerve. The mandibular nerve, as we know from the anatomy, supplies these muscles, supplies the muscle of mastication and other muscles. Supplies the muscle of mastication that include the masseter, temporalis, lateral pterygoid, and medial pterygoid. Masseter and temporalis, when we press on your teeth or your jaws, the masseter and temporalis become hardened. These are muscle of mastication. And there are two other muscles lying at a more deep level, medial pterygoid and lateral pterygoid. So there are four pairs of muscle of mastication, 4 on each side: masseter, temporalis, medial pterygoid, and lateral pterygoid. Other muscles include two tensor muscles, tensor palati and tensor tympani, mild hyoid muscle, and anterior belly of digastric, Mylohyoid muscle, as you know, forms the diaphragm of the mouth. Forms the diaphragm of the mouth, or the floor of the mouth, and associated with the anterior belly of digestive. Anterior belly of digestive. These are the muscles derived from the first pharyngeal arch, and also the muscle supplied by the mandibular nerve. So the nerve of the first pharyngeal arch is the mandibular nerve of the fifth cranial nerve, trigeminal nerve. Then we come to the aortic arch artery. Aortic arch artery. In the first arch, it is a small artery represented by the maxillary artery. It disappears, but a small portion persists to form the maxillary artery. So we can remember only maxillary artery as a derivative of the pharyngeal arch artery for the first arch. Then we come to the second arch. The skeletal element, as we said, include, as we said in the previous figure diagram, stapes, styloid process of temporal bone, stylohyoid ligament, lesser horn of hyoid bone, superior part of hyoid bone. As we said, all these structures contain or begin the S, and the word second begin with S. The muscle arising from the second pharyngeal arch, these are muscles. Before mention them, you must remember the nerve supply of this arch, which is the seventh or facial cranial nerve. So the facial or seventh cranial nerve is the nerve of the muscles of the face. As you know in the anatomy, the head contain two main types of muscles. Muscles of mastication, which mentioned before, and the muscle of expiration that will be mentioned here. Muscle of expiration, facial expiration, are supplied by the facial nerve, which is called the seventh cranial nerve. Seventh cranial nerve supplies the muscles of the face and the skull, in addition to some muscles, other muscles. The muscles of the face and the scalp include occipitofrontalis that cover the skull, extending anteroposterior or posterior, occipitofrontalis that move the eyebrow, occipitofrontalis. The second is auricularis muscle. These muscles are radiating from the auricle of the ear. These muscles are well developed in animals, but in human they are rudimentary. But just mention them, auricularis muscle. And other muscle controlling the orbit, called orbicularis oculi. Other muscle controlling the opening of the mouth, orbicularis oris. Buccinator muscle forming the cheek, and muscles of the lip and nose. These the most prominent muscles of the face and scalp, supplied by the facial nerve. These are occipitofrontalis, auricularis muscles, orbicularis oculi, orbicularis oris, buccinator, muscle of lips and nose. Other muscles include stapedius muscle related to the stapes, inside the skull. Stapedius muscle, platysma muscle in the neck, and the superficial fascia of the neck. This muscle moves the skin of the neck in animals, but in human it is rudimentary. But just mention it, platysma muscle. Then stylohyoid and posterior belly of digestive. From the first arch, the anterior belly of digestive, but from the second arch is the posterior belly of digestive. Secondly, the nerve is, as we said, the facial nerve or seventh cranial nerve. The artery disappear except a small part called stapedial artery. The third arch skeletal element, as we said, lower part of hyoid bone, greater horn of hyoid bone. Regarding the muscle, there is only one muscle, stylopharyngeal muscle, stylopharyngeus muscle, supplied by glossopharyngeal nerve, and the pharyngeal arch artery gives three arteries. This is the third number, the arch number 3, the third, give 3 arteries which are called common carotid, internal carotid, and external carotid. The fourth arch, skeletal element is thyroid cartilage, and the muscular element is cricothyroid muscle, supplied by superior laryngeal nerve of vagus. The arch artery will be discussed later on in this lecture. On the right side forms the subclavian, right subclavian. On the left side form part of the arch of the aorta. The sixth arch give rise to the other laryngeal cartilage except thyroid. Muscular element here give other intrinsic muscle of the larynx except the cricothyroid. Supplied by the recurrent laryngeal nerve of vagus, the pharyngeal arch gives the pulmonary artery on each side and ductus arteriosus on the left side. To remember the nerve supplying the arches, this is a branch of the fifth cranial nerve, this is the seventh, this is the ninth. 5, 7, 9, then 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 on 10. 5, 7, 9, then 10, 10. Next. These diagrams to remember the muscle derived from the pharyngeal arches. As we said, to remember the muscle, remember their nerve supply. This is the anatomy of the major 3 nerve of the nerve supply of the first 3 pharyngeal arches. This is the mandibular nerve supplying the first pharyngeal arch, supplying, as we said, the muscle of mastication, medial pterygoid, lateral pterygoid, and temporalis and masseter. These are the muscle of mastication, in addition to tensor muscles, tensor palati and tensor tympani, and in addition the mylohyoid supply, as we said, mylohyoid muscle forming the floor of the mouth and accompanying anterior belly of digestion. This is the facial nerve supplying the second pharyngeal arch. This is a muscle supplied by it. These branches coming out from the parotid gland, supplying the muscles of expression, muscles of the face. This muscle, stapedius muscle, also give nerve supply from the facial nerve, in addition to nerve to digastric and nerve to nerve to digastric or vestibule of digastric, and nerve to stylohyoid muscle. This is a glossopharyngeal nerve, or ninth cranial nerve, supplying only one muscle that accompanies it. That is called stylopharyngeus muscle. Next. We finish the derivative of the pharyngeal arch. Here is the derivative of the pharyngeal cleft and pharyngeal pouch. Pharyngeal cleft called ectodermal derivative, and pouch are called endodermal derivative. This is the ectodermal derivative or pharyngeal cleft, and these are endodermal derivative or pharyngeal pouches. The first arch, pharyngeal cleft, give rise to the external ear that is represented by the external auricle of the ear, external acoustic meatus, and outer covering or outer layer of the eardrum. On the other side here, the first cleft give rise to tubotympanic recess, represented here by the Eustachian tube, auditory tube here, and its distal end expand to form tympanic cavity or middle ear cavity, and its end forms the inner layer of the eardrum. This is the first pouch. This is the first cleft. The other clefts, as we see here, the other clefts are buried or covered by the down growth of the second arch to fuse with the root of the neck, covering these pouches that disappear, covering these clefts that disappear later on, forming at first temporary ectodermal lined cavity that obliterate and disappear. Later on, forming the smooth appearance or smooth contour of the external surface of the neck. External surface of the neck, as you see, is smooth, not irregular as this. Is smooth like this. This is these are the derivatives of the pharyngeal clefts. Here are the derivative of the pharyngeal pouches. As we said, the first pouch give rise to eustachian tube, middle ear cavity or tympanic cavity, and mucosa of the eardrum. Or inner layer of the eardrum. The eardrum, as you see here, eardrum here is formed from 3 layers: outer epithelial covering from the first cleft, inner mucosal layer from the first pouch, and middle from the mesoderm of the first arch. Then the second pouch gives rise to the palatine tonsil. Third gives rise to thymus gland and inferior parathyroid gland. To remember it, thymus begin with TH, and third here begin with TH. And the third layer of word of third is I. Here is I. So the third gives thymus and inferior parathyroid gland. The thymus gland, as we know, is situated in the thorax. Descend downward to lie in front of the pericardium. So it pulls the parathyroid develop with it from this side downward to reach below the other parathyroid that arises from the cleft below it. So the inferior parathyroid arises from the third pouch, while the superior parathyroid arises from the fourth, or from the pouch below the third. So the third pouch gives rise to thymus gland and inferior parathyroid, while the fourth, as we said, gives superior parathyroid that pass directly to reach its situation behind the thyroid gland, and give another rudimentary body called altum branchial body that share in the formation of the thyroid gland itself by forming the parafollicular cells. These are the derivative of the pharyngeal clefts, or called endodermal derivative of pharyngeal. These are the congenital anomalies of the branchial apparatus. Here, the first is the branchial cyst. Branchial cyst here, due to failure of the cyst that we mentioned before, ectodermal cyst, failure of its obliteration, so a cyst remain in the side of the neck that might expand and form cystic swelling on the side of the neck. Another is the branchial sinus. This is a small blind tract. Another branchial fistula. The fistula differs from the sinus that it has an outer opening and inner opening. This is due to communication between the outer and the inner aspect, branchial fistula, then branchial cartilage that appear as a small collection of cartilage, like the cartilage of the auricle of the ear, but here is abnormal collection of the cartilage on the side of the neck. Here we talk about the fate of the pharyngeal arch artery that we talk about it, but here we'll talk about it with the diagram to be more clarified. Here is the truncus arteriosus connected by another sac called the aortic sac. From the aortic sac, six arteries arise from each side from it. Each artery of these arteries pass in corresponding pharyngeal arch. You know that the pharyngeal arch is 6. The fifth pharyngeal arch disappears with its artery, so the remaining are 5: the first, second, third, fourth, and sixth. As we said, the first arch disappears except a small portion forming what is called maxillary artery. The second also disappears except a small artery called stapedial artery. And the second begin with S. Stapedial artery forms the second arch. Here, these are small arteries not represented here in this diagram. The third arch, as we said, number 3 gives 3 arteries, which are called common carotid, external carotid, and internal carotid. Then the fourth arch, as we said, gives part of the arch of the aorta and right subclavian artery. Then we come to the sixth pharyngeal arch. The fifth, as we said, disappears completely. The sixth pharyngeal arch here give rise the proximal part PB, proximal B give rise to P, pulmonary artery. The proximal part of the sixth pharyngeal arch on each side gives the pulmonary artery on each side. The distal part on the right side here disappears, while in the left side persists to form what is called ductus arteriosus, connecting the pulmonary with the aorta, pulmonary trunk with the aorta, or pulmonary artery with the aorta. This is ductus arteriosus. So the sixth pharyngeal arch artery, the proximal part give rise to the pulmonary artery, while the distal part D disappear here, D also, and persist here, give ductus arteriosus, also begin with D. Here disappear, here ductus arteriosus. This is the distal part here. This is the proximal part, proximal to the aortic sac. Distal part, the distal from the aortic sac here. As you see, the aortic arch form join together here, forming the dorsal aorta. Dorsal aorta join as the fourth thoracic somaid to form descending aorta, one single artery called descending aorta. This appearance of the distal part of sixth pharyngeal arch, and it's persistent on the left side here, gives the difference in the anatomy of the recurrent laryngeal nerve. The recurrent laryngeal nerve on the left side descends to the thorax to return around the ductus arteriosus that not disappear here. While here there is no ductus arteriosus, so there is no ligamentum arteriosum. So here the nerve returns at the root of the neck around the right subclavian artery. This is anatomical difference and has developmental clarification. Embryological origin of the arch of the aorta. The arch of the aorta formed from the anterior part of truncus arteriosus, left horn of aortic sac, left fourth aortic arch artery, left dorsal aorta. You can see the previous diagram to see the embryological origin of the arch of the. This is the congenital anomalies congenital anomalies of arterial system. The first is patent ductus arteriosus. Patent ductus arteriosus. The ductus arteriosus, as we said, in the postnatal changes in the circulation, one of them is the ductus arteriosus that obliterate and later on form ligament called ligamentum arteriosus. Failure of obliteration of this duct result in ductus arteriosus, patent ductus arteriosus. Patent ductus arteriosus could result in problems for the person or the baby, as the blood pressure in the aorta is higher than that of the pulmonary trunk, so blood can pass from the aorta of higher pressure to the pulmonary trunk of lower pressure, so this reflects on the right side of the heart, causing right side heart failure, and also might reflected on the two lungs, causing pulmonary congestion. This duct must be ligated, should be ligated if discovered, should be ligated, not cut, as the recurrent laryngeal nerve passing around it, or just ligating to prevent the blood from passing from the aorta to the pulmonary trunk. Another congenital anomaly is coarctation of the aorta. The term coarctation means narrowing of the aorta. Narrowing of the aorta occur here in the part of the arch of the aorta following the origin of the big three arteries named left subclavian, left common carotid, and brachiocephalic artery. Here, this point is, as we see here, is corresponding or attached to the point of the ductus arteriosus. After pierce the ductus arteriosus, its muscle wall contract to obliterate. Sometimes the muscle of the ductus arteriosus extend into the muscle of this part of the aortic arch, so when the ductus arteriosus muscle contract to be obliterated, there might narrowing or contraction of this part of the arch of the aorta, resulting in its narrowing. The arch of the aorta, as you know, is wide, so not obliterate. Only narrowing occur here. What is called coarctation of the aorta. Coarctation of the aorta result in clinical manifestation in the baby, resulting the blood is pushed more to the upper half of the body through these big arteries, while the lower part of the body, the blood is low. The blood flow is low. So the blood pressure in the upper half is higher than the lower half. So there is hypertension when you measure the blood pressure from the upper limb, while there is hypotension in the lower limb. Hypertension in the upper half and hypotension in the lower half of the body. The third is the double aortic arch. Double aortic arch, as you see, double aortic arch result from failure of obliteration and disappearance of this part of the aortic arch that we see it in the diagram of the derivative of the pharyngeal arch artery. This part disappears. Persistence of persistent part of the right dorsal aorta result in complete ring called double aortic arch. Right and left aortic arch forming a ring. The ring surround, as you see, the esophagus and trachea. The resulting in might compress them, forming resulting in dysphagia and dyspnea due to compression of this important structure passing through the aortic ring. The fourth is the right aortic arch. You know that the aortic arch is left. Failure of obliteration of this part, and on the other side, disappearance of this part result in formation of right aortic arch instead of left aortic arch. Thank you. شكرا.